board meeting of October 6, 2020. And welcome to all those in attendance. Thank you for coming. And for those in our teleconference. We have Valerie and Adrian joining us via Zoom and by teleconference. So she's sitting over here beside me and listening intently. Thank you. I would like to recognize that we are on the traditional territories of the Niklama, Shwetmak, and Stratlium nations, and we serve all of these students, and we work and play in their lands, and we look forward to working and playing with them in their territories. Thank you very much. Public forum, there is no public forum. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Can I get a recommendation that or it's recommended that the agenda be adopted as presented? Vicky, thank you. Second. Orra, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And the approval of the consent agenda. Valerie? Vicky, second. And all in favor? Thank you. And we will start off with a presentation from Gloria Mertens on behalf of the Ashcroft Slough Society. Thank you. And
I'm here. Good evening, Gloria. I'm here. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you to the Board of Education for this opportunity to introduce you to our new society. And I'd like to start as well acknowledging that I'm on the traditional territories of the three nations, and I do so with respect. My name is Gloria Mertens, and I am here with Dan Collett, who is also a member of our executive. And the objective today is threefold. We sort of want to introduce you to our society and why it was formed, what the Slough's value is for educational purposes, and what are we seeking from the Board of Education. So who are we? We're a grassroots society. We started as a loose-knit group of people and consolidated and became a society when it became clear that a voice that was organized would have more impact than voices that were separate and individual. So we came together and we represent many different stakeholders and different users group that have traditionally used the Slough area in Ashcroft. We are on our executive board. We have most of us are educators. I'm a retired educator. Dan as well has been a high school educator. We have a principal. We have 2 homeschoolers and a passionate PAC member who has devoted much time throughout her children's time at the schools. We are passionate about keeping the Slough available for future generations and for the well-being of our community. So where is the Slough? The Slough is 3.5 kilometers along the Thompson River. The only access route is through Evans Road. It is the one route that is river, that allows us river access in this community. It is a main road, designated so by the village of Ashcroft. It was resurfaced in 2016. It is well maintained, and it is to industrial standards. It is not a dangerous road. Those who drive it may drive sometimes dangerously, but the road itself is in excellent condition. Traditionally, the access points to the Slough, there were 3 access points, 2 at railway crossings. They were private railway crossings, and one was a well-worn path across the railway tracks, and we're talking about the CN railway tracks. There was a pull-out for parking, and I took my class down to the Slough. I've also taken my classes down to Bonaparte. Both times I did have to cross the CN tracks. So what is the Slough? The Slough is about 50 acres of green space, approximately a quarter of which are, or 10 to 15 acres of which are below the high water mark and accessible to the public. It is separated from Ashcroft Terminal's operations by a steep CN berm but it is private property. It is riparian land, so protected by the Riparian Area Protection Regulation. It is zoned parkland by the Village of Ashcroft. It is flooded yearly, so there is no ability for Ashcroft Terminal to develop any infrastructure or get development variance permits. Why is the slough so important to educators? For generations, the slough has been used by presenters, by teachers, by...
Announcing participants. Kathy Ashcroft.
Hello, Kathy, please put your phone on mute now. Thank you.
bringing generations of young people down, families together, groups together. Even when in the early 1900s, where Barnes School was down in that location, I guess I gotta go a little bit lower, the slough was used by the students. It's a spacious, wild, outdoor classroom. As I mentioned, there are no infrastructure, so it is wild. But it is also riparian and riverine, so there's a huge amount of sedimentation on the property, and there are lots of different pools and areas that are very, very safe. As I said, young kids traditionally have gone down there with their families, and there has never been an accident down at the slough with those students. There was an accident about 5 years ago, I understand, from a camper. Why is it important to educators as well? It's close. You don't have to travel outside of the area in order to get there. It's also historically significant. There is archaeological evidence that has been conducted by Ashcroft Terminal that has demonstrated that the First Nations gathered there, both the Bonaparte and the Ashcroft Indian bands, gathered, hunted, fished, as well as met there and used the space as an access point to the water. It's also historically significant in Ashcroft in that the pioneers or the founding fathers of Ashcroft were all associated with the Butte Ranch, which is just that level where Ashcroft Terminal is above the slough area. And they own that property, the slough. So Barnes, Bose, Evans, and Brink all had direct connections to that property. And they invited, right from the acquisition of the Crown Grant, they invited the public to the slough to curl, to picnic, and it was always available to do so. So it was a designated area for people to gather. As curling rinks and so forth started to be developed and infrastructure in the town site itself, further away, where Ashcroft is now, that became less of a gathering spot. Geologically, it's also very interesting, and it makes it very important for students to know. It's geologically active, so you can see geology actually in action. There's mass wasting, there's deposition, there's weathering, there's erosion, and it changes over time. Every year is different. Another reason for it's important for educators is that it is a living laboratory of biodiversity. And biodiversity is what the parks for now in BC is really trying to encourage, is to increase biodiversity in our province as much as possible. Because of climate change and adaptation, we need to have that biodiversity. It is a type of wetland, but at the same time, it's in the desert of Ashcroft. It's easiest to see in such a wetland how climate change is affected and how adaptations can be accommodated. The last reason it's so important for educators is for the mental well-being of kids and families. Just recently on CBC, I listened, and they were talking about getting kids out, especially during this time of COVID, getting kids out into the wild, and you can't teach kids about the environment unless you go out into the environment. You can't do it from the classroom. In any season, it is splendid and can be accessed in any season to see the different changes in the ecosystems. It's great for exploration. There's all kinds of driftwood, rocks, pebbles, different sizes, so kids can explore not just physically, but also artistically and creatively. So what's the issue? The inland port is private land. They are now asserting their proprietary rights after 20 years having had the property. They have put up a gate. They have decommissioned the public road, which is in dispute at the moment. They consider it a private road, and we consider it a public road, and that would be up to the courts to decide. But they are decommissioning that road that was always used, and all the railway crossings are also being closed off. So what's the solution? We support the economic stimulation of Ashcroft Terminal. There is no doubt that it is bringing more prosperity to our region, but it also has impacted us and will continue to impact the community. And we're trying to understand and negotiate with Ashcroft Terminal that there has been an impact, not simply economically with the stimulation, but also with many of the environmental things that have happened, such as dust billowing, noise, light trespass, and of course, access to the slough and the green space. So we appreciate Ashcroft Terminal's efforts now to start to raise its public profile in the community and starting to do things now more for the community, including the working group that was struck in order to try to look at a solution to the community's concern about access to the slough. However, there was some difficulty in the working group as far as understanding, was it access to the slough or alternatives to slough access or alternative access. And so that was miscommunicated, and community members thought they were looking at different ways to access the slough, and the Ashcroft Terminal group that was led by Ashcroft Terminal basically said, no, we're looking at alternatives to access to the slough. So that was a concern, and that's when the Ashcroft Slough Society was incorporated. So we're endeavoring, as a society, through public pressure to get the Ashcroft Terminal to honor their commitment. They made a commitment in 2013 at a public meeting in February to saying, and this was through the mayor at the time, that access would be maintained. There was a large contingent of people at that meeting, and they had said that it was the intent of the company to maintain access for the public. So we're trying to convince them that there would be no significant impact of having anybody coming down there. What we're looking for as a society, and we've compromised quite a bit, is safe, legal, pedestrian access. And that would be outside their boundary through a tunnel, is what we're hoping, and the construction of a pathway just for pedestrians. So we would help conserve the green space. It would not be impacted greatly by tons and tons of people. Classes would be probably smaller, as they have to be now anyway with COVID, and that's what we're trying to do, is convince them. So we believe that Ashcroft Terminal development and the community well-being of having that green space can coexist. We believe we can share the space and that it's safe to do so. We believe that kids need to see that commercial enterprise can negotiate and can coexist with environmental concerns as well as the community. So we ask, what are we asking from the Board of Education, is for you to consider a letter of support for the Ashcroft Slough Society so that we can continue our advocacy and put public pressure onto the Ashcroft Terminal to negotiate in good faith different access to the slough and not alternatives to the slough. Thank you.
I add,
Thank you, Gloria.
would it be okay if I added one comment?
One comment? Sure.
Hi, I'm Daniel Collett, and my comment is that we believe that we have a very good case out there with public road through private space, and that has been proven out with the Douglas Lake Ranch problem that existed, but now has gone to court, and people like us won that case and gained access. So we're looking for access. We don't want to go to court. We hope that we can settle with them in a good way and become partners with them. We want to work with them. So thank you very much for listening to us, and you can see more about us at ashcroftsloughsociety.com, and there's some videos there you can watch as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gloria. Does any trustees have any questions they wanted to ask? Carmen?
Thank you very much for your presentation. You said so much in your comments that I'm even more convinced that this is really important. So I just have a question. Is there any reason, like normally in our processes, we have the presentation and then at the next meeting, the item may or may not go on an agenda for an action. Is there any rush? Do you need, like, would it help you, or is there a pressure that you need a deadline? Like our next meeting isn't until a month from now?
It is in a procedure bylaw that we do.
Oh, it's in our procedure bylaw, so unless it's an emergency, right? Okay. So is it an emergency, or we would normally follow?
The community working group has finished their consultations. They will be recommending, it was an advisory committee that Ashcroft Terminal put together. They will be putting it out probably in the paper this week. There's really no rush because their construction is continuing on. There'd be no access to that way anyway. But we have to get all the information together anyway and gather as much support as we can. So that's the component that we're looking at. So I wouldn't say that there'd be a rush.
Thank you. Larry?
Just looking at the dry climate southern interior, first of all, I'd like to comment that I believe it's important to preserve any wetlands within the area that as much as you can, because of just that value and the lack of wetlands in general. You mentioned archaeological, I guess, finds within that area, and I'm just wondering if you have the support of the Ashcroft Indian Band or in the Catholic Nation in terms of their, I guess, influence in developing perhaps a partnership with this group. Wondering about that.
Sure. Yes, the archaeological finding was significant at the that was found on Ashcroft Terminal property, so it is significant finding that does show the gathering of both bands probably. We have, as a society, we are not at this point linked to any other groups. We are seeking allies, and yes, we are seeking right now our membership drive. We haven't been able to do the membership drive so much because of COVID, but we are seeking allies, and that includes both Ashcroft Indian Band and Bonaparte Indian Band, as well as anglers associations and environmental associations. That takes some time in order to develop, but our membership itself is open to anybody. So we are a distinct society on our own, but we are seeking those alliances. So yes, we will be doing that, but in conjunct with the Ashcroft Indian Band or the Bonaparte, at this point, fatigue and so many land claims and so forth, I imagine it takes its toll on a lot of First Nations people.
We're just starting.
We're just getting started. That's the thing.
Thank you. Orra, did you have any questions, Vicky? No, sir. Great. Donna?
I have lots, but I'm a lands manager, so that's the reason why it comes out to, I don't know if it's pertinent to this meeting in regards to it. Larry did bring up the archaeological finds that are there.
Donna, can you please speak up? Thank you.
Is that better? Okay, so, in the finds that are there, that depicts whether or not, activities can go on. If it's material items that are found there, the Simon Fraser University or another site, BC Archives would pick them up and take them away if, because they're still on private land, right? So being on private land would depict whether or not the owner relinquishes the rights to those finds. And that's kind of where it's at. BC Archives usually picks them up and takes it away for safekeeping, study, and dating. So with that, your presentation needs to address that as well too. I've heard part of that in the teaching, which is good. The other thing is like Larry mentioned, that the Ashcroft Indian Band needs to be part of that discussion as well too, because it is their ancestors. And then the other thing is the people that are taking the land back, do they have a development plan that they have?
At this point, Ashcroft Terminal has not relinquished the property at all. So that is what we're looking at, is we're looking for a donation, a park donation through the conservatory donation process. We're looking at different ways that are possible, but at this point they have stated no, that they're not giving it up. They had done all the archaeological dig. All of the archaeological finds were on the upper level, not on the slough level. The slough is almost flooded, so it gets flushed out every year. But the archaeological find is fairly close to the pump house, that area there, and all the artifacts were transported to someplace safe, as far as I understand. And the expansion was delayed by about a year. They do have a First Nation person on site for every shovelful they basically do. So they are following all the legalities as far as, and the consultation that's required, as far as I know. So as far as addressing it in through the teaching, I think that would be important with any classroom teacher, yes.
Just the last follow-up would be taxation purposes. If you can talk to them about the taxation of this, that they wouldn't have to pay taxation if it got donated over, they might consider that as well too. So
Thank you.
that's my
Yes.
final input as a land manager.
Yes, for
Thank you, Donna.
donations, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Valerie, did you have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, and we will bring it back to our next open meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we will carry on. Thank you. And we will go to 6.2, the district restart plan update. Okay, thank you. I will turn it over to both of you.
we just wanted to provide an update on the return to the stage 2 restart plan. We have been back in school now since September the 14th, and thought it would be a good time to bring you up to date on some of the latest student activities or school district operations. So on the next slide, we have a picture of a bulletin board in one of the sites. And what you may recall from some of our earlier presentations is that schools have taken their health.
Participants exiting.
Y de nuevo, band.
Schools have taken their responsibilities around health and safety very seriously. They have implemented the school district health and safety plan as well as their own school plan. And they are working with students on the protocols to keep them safe as well as staff. So the health and safety plan has been in place since we returned in June. It has been modified as needed as legislation has changed or advice from the Ministry of Education has changed. We are following the guidelines that and the protocols that the Ministry of Education has in place for us. They have advised us that if there's any conflicts between any of the information that is posted, it is the Ministry of Education protocols that we follow. The District Health and Safety Committee is in place and functioning very positively. We have representatives of both union groups and the principals group as well. And so we have met actually weekly. Since school returned, we're now moving to bi-weekly, and we do continue to address items as they come up as a group and work with schools on any changes that need to be in place. We did notice quite early in the school system, in the school year, that we were impacted by staff illnesses quite quickly. And so we are looking at options of filling positions where we maybe have struggled to replace. In particular, bus driver positions, custodial positions are obviously critical positions to school operations. And when we are short in those areas, there's a big impact. So we are using some of the federal dollars, as you will see later in the agenda, to post additional positions in an attempt to address those shortages as they arise.
Excellent, thank you. And so now just a little bit of information on the options for student learning. And as per your board work plan, the board will receive your enrollment report at the November meeting, but we can provide you just a little bit of information around what we are seeing at this time around student enrollment. So at this time, there are 1,056 lovely human beings who have returned to school and to the brick and mortar school. And of course, just as we normally do, we are supporting them in their learning. But there are a number of families who are working with their schools who have said, we're going to return, but we are not quite ready yet. And we are talking about those families as on a transitional plan. And they are part of that number. And so with those families, schools are supporting them around maybe once a week, and how do we increase that to twice a week as we build confidence and understanding of the procedures we have in place to keep students safe. Of course, we have families that have chosen to homeschool their children this year, and schools are working hard to support students and families in the choice that they've made, not to have any judgment or reflection upon that. And so at this time, there are about 24 families who have chosen that for their children. It is interesting that since September 14th, that number has gone down. And as families are having those conversations and students are returning to school. And that will be each school's practice throughout the year is to welcome students and families back as they choose to return. There are 21 students who have moved and transitioned to distributed learning, where their learning is being provided by another school in another school district this year. And within our school district and within the Restart Plan, there is remote learning for Indigenous students who are living on reserve. So as rights holders, Indigenous communities had another option available to them. And so at this time, there are 20 students who are being supported in a unique program. I think that we are incredibly proud of, actually. The teacher has met with all of the families, assessed what their needs and priorities are, and are creating multidisciplinary project-based learning based on student interest, and is going out into community to meet with students, creating health and safety plans that work for the Indigenous communities, where they are comfortable having the teacher in their community center, in their facilities to support the students. So despite those reductions, at this time, the district has not reconfigured schools, and so you do see class sizes smaller than you would normally anticipate in our schools, and it has not resulted in any layoffs or transfers of teaching or support staff. And we will consistently work to welcome back students and families as they are comfortable coming back to our brick and mortar schools. So on the next slide, we are always mindful, though, that we need to prepare in the event that there is a stage 3, 4, or 5 change to our structure this year. And so that planning is underway. We've taken a draft to the principal group, received some great feedback on that, made revisions, and will be seeking input from the First Peoples Education Council at the October meeting around that. The plans that we had last year do not align anymore, as the guidelines and criteria for each of those stages has changed. And all of our planning is based on our experience and the strengths and stretches that we saw last year. So that's a restart update.
Thank you very much. That's good news. Can I just ask for that number again, please, for the students that returned? Sorry, I just missed it. The first number, the 15 or the 1,000?
1,056.
5 and 6. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Vicky? Trustee Trill.
I'm just wondering, have you had requests for alternate styles of education, like hybrid models or distributed learning, or just people seem to be satisfied?
And there were certainly requests. I think some of the communication that came out provincially may have given some families a misunderstanding of what was approved by government for us to offer. And schools, I think, have done a remarkable job in really informing parents of what is available within our approved plan to provide for them. For those that want distributed learning, schools have sought to help families make a choice.
Sounds very good, very promising. Thank you. 7.1, year-to-date financial information. It's recommended that the Board of Education for the September 30, 2020 year-to-date financial information as presented. Please.
The year-to-date report as of September 30th is attached to your agenda on pages 10 to 24. It is early in the year, obviously, with just 1 month of operations in place. So the projections that you see in front of you are preliminary, based on the information that we have available at this time. I likely won't go into great detail on the numbers because it is quite early in the school year, but certainly at the next year-to-date report, there will be more information that is available. You will note on page 13, which is Schedule 2A. Okay, we're having technology difficulties on the screen, but trustees do have the documents in front of you. So on Schedule 2A, page 13, the variance in revenue, the 123,000 there, you will note is the Safe Return to School grant. That's the provincial dollars that have been provided to districts. So that is where you see that increase in grant reflected. On Schedule 2B, you'd see some of the variances there as we are early in understanding what the school year will look like. There are some increases in costs and things like supplies due to the increase of the Safe Schools grant. There are some reductions in variance or reductions in costs due to COVID-19 and less travel. That's a variance there on page 14 of professional development and travel. It's the third item under services and supplies. Using that as an example, a variance of 187,000 is projected. At this point, that's projected due to obviously less travel, less professional development opportunities, and we'll be able to monitor that over the coming months. On page 15 of 34, the year-to-date budget report shows the expenses by department. If you look at the fourth column over, percent spent, it does show an amount that we would anticipate this early in the year of 14%. And it does show the column next to that, forecast expenses to June 30th, 2021. And the final column on that report, the variance from budget. At this point, we're projecting $600,000 variance or surplus. And again, we'll monitor that over the coming months. On page 16 of 34 is the First Peoples Education Council. It shows the allocations for the individual schools for the this current school year, surplus amounts from 2019-20, showing the total budget as well as expenses year to date. The First Peoples Education Council is reviewing the surplus outstanding from the administration dollars of 81,000, and those discussions will also be revisited in October. Schedule 3 on pages 18 to 21 shows the special purpose funds. Those are grants that are provided to the district for a specific purpose. The federal Safe Return to Class grant of $396,000 is projected for School District 74 is reflected on page 21 because it's a new grant. It's shown in that last column there. And it is also a discussion item coming up in the next agenda item. The schedule for page 22 of 34 shows your capital budget, and again shows anticipated transfer in the middle column there, local capital of $574,000. And we're expecting to expense $3 million from local capital, mostly due to the renovation of the Lytton School. So that is highlighted on Schedule 4. Page 23 of 34, restricted capital balances. This is a report that is specific to Gold Trail at the request of the board. It highlights the balances in both the local capital fund, which is the first section of the report. It shows your balance at the beginning of the year, additions to the local capital budget, expenses to date, showing the balance as of September 30th. The 4 items underneath show expected expenses this school year, leaving then the available balance in about the middle of the page there of $3.9 million. The next section, bylaw capital, are funds that the board has received from the ministry for specific purposes. And finally, the last portion, the Ministry of Ed restricted capital, those are funds that the board has set aside in the event that there is a new school built in Lillooet, and the $469,000 is from sale of properties in Lillooet, so that is identified each month. Or each report. The final report on page 24 of 34 is the individual trustee balances for professional development. The first column is the amount remaining at the end of June 2020, your allocation for this current school year, giving you the total budget for this school year. And we also report this quarterly so you can see what is remaining in each of your trustee allocations.
Thank you very much, Linda. Does anyone have any questions? Trustee Ranta?
Just going back to our unique page on page 23, I think it is, and so, because as the Lytton project kind of continues and hopefully completes, what I understand then is that we will, after the project is basically complete, or is it complete for this year, the remaining balance of $3,968,000, which is the figure that you said was on the middle page, is that, will any of the remainder need to go towards the Lytton project, or are we expecting that would be left after?
That is correct. That we would expect that at the end of June 2021, the balance for the local capital fund should be about $4 million.
Thank you. Trustee Trill?
I had lots of questions, but I think you answered almost all of them in your highlight, but I do have a few left. I think I answered this, or asked this another time, but I can't remember the answer. Statement 2, which is the first, or page 11 of 34. When it says net revenue or expenditure, it shows a deficit of 80,000 in a bit. But I'm sure we didn't budget a negative amount, so can you just explain that to me? I'm not sure why it says that.
That is the accumulation. So the 80,000 is more a reflection of the amortization expense. So that is reflected in the capital budget. So it would not impact operations, and it's because the three funds are added together.
Thank you. And then another question, this one is on Schedule 2B, page 14 of 34. There's a note that says schools are being conservative until they know their final numbers. Can you provide more information about that? Note 2.
Yeah, note 2 is a reflection of the expenses for educational assistance. So in the spring, the schools project their student numbers for the fall, and part of those projections are the exceptional student reporting, so students identified in categories 1, 2, or 3 that result in additional funding for schools to allocate to educational assistance. So until final numbers are known in September, schools don't necessarily allocate all those dollars until September 30th.
Just a few more. Some questions regarding the changes in special purpose funds, page 19 of 34. I'm just not super familiar with scholarships. I'm assuming that scholarships that we give to graduates, but maybe just can you further clarify what that one is?
Scholarships on page 19. So right now there shows an opening balance of 20,600, and you'll see under other, we expect that we'll receive about another 500 this year, but we will also pay out 3,500, leaving a projected balance of 17,610. Those are actually funds that are donated to the district and that we manage. So there's the Peg Marriott Fund for Clinton. There's other scholarships that are provided to the district that we hold and then allocate out as they are awarded.
Oh, okay. So the grads don't actually go to Peg. What was that?
Peg Marriott.
Peg Marriott. They come through here. Okay, correct. I didn't realize that. And then on the next page, classroom enhancement fund overhead and staffing. I'm just wondering, is this targeted for implementation for the new provincial curriculum? Is that what that one was for?
These are grants that are allocated to districts because of the provincial collective agreement. So there are funds as a result of language in the teacher's contract.
Okay. And then just over on the same page, after school sport and art initiative, that is it the leftover from the provincial transportation grants from 2019? No.
No, these are two grants for programs that we're operating in Lillooet and also in Clinton. They're after school initiative. They were grants that were provided through ministry, and so they were programs that operated last year.
Okay, I think I'm almost done. Yes, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Anybody else have any questions? Valerie? No? I had one small question. And that is on page, I lost it. I think I've answered my own question anyway, so I was just, I believe, where I see it. Okay, if that's, everybody is good with this? Can we get, I'm gonna have to get back to the agenda. I totally agree. Okay, the recommendation that the Board of Education approve the September 30, 2020 year-to-date financial information as presented. So moved. Trustee Trill and seconded Trustee Adrian. Oh, she's waving at me. All in favor? Thank you. Grants in response to COVID-19. Attached is information on the provincial and federal return to school grants. In September, it was requested district management provide a recommendation for the spending of the federal safe return to school class grants. So it's a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the spending of the federal safe return to class grant. On page 26, we're on.
So we provided information on both grants. The Safe Return to School grant, the $123,000 that was provided by the provincial government, you see is reflected there in the first paragraph, and we are required to report on the use of that a couple of times over this school year. We have spent about $49,000 as of the end of September, and we do anticipate that the remainder will be spent by the end of June. The flies back. The Federal Safe Return to Class Fund, the one-time grant of $396,000 must also be expended by June 30th, 2021, and we will be required to report on that as well. There are recommendations and expectations for the spending of the funds as outlined in the memo, which is attached to your agenda. And there is a list of items that we are recommending that could be allocated to the $396,000. We are suggesting touchless faucets, custodial equipment, duct cleaning, water bottle filling stations, plexiglass barriers, and outdoor sinks. Those are all areas that would meet the expectations for the dollars, as well as the relief bus driver custodian positions that we referenced earlier in our health and safety challenge and staffing, and also additional bus driver time for regular bus drivers who are having to perform additional bus cleaning hours at this time.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Trustee Ranta?
I didn't really get information, and I don't need it.
Sorry,
on.
Carmen, can you speak up?
Okay, the details of what that money can be spent on. Does it include touchless toilets?
That would likely fit the category as well, yes.
The reason I bring that up is because from time to time in the PAC meeting in Casper, actually it does kind of bubble up that topic. I'm not exactly sure why, and maybe it's been already rectified, but I just thought I should blurt that out just in case that there's a little surplus there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Valerie? Oh, just a second. Linda wants to clarify.
Just to clarify that.
Sorry, just that there's background noise, somebody's not muted on the phone.
No, it's actually kids outside the door here playing.
I was just going to clarify that replacement of toilets would probably be a capital project and would be more expensive because when you're replacing the fixtures, it usually requires plumbing and stuff. So it's a bigger project, but we are trying to replace those as we can for sure. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is that the Board of Education approve the spending of the federal safe return to class grant. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
So I just wanted to clarify, Linda, I know in the beginning of the memo here, it does say that we received the money, it's $123,000 for cleaning supplies, face masks, and hand hygiene. So just on that list, the comment that I made to myself was ask about masks and ask about sanitizing stations within the school. So would that still be provided from that first money, or is there room for it to be provided in the second money?
The first set of provincial dollars were used for both masks and hand sanitizers. However, if we needed additional funds and the federal fund was not fully spent, we could also access that grant for those as well.
Thank you. Larry? Trustee Casper?
I'm looking at outdoor sinks and I'm wondering if that's something that would be outside of the doorways or the entrance to each of the schools, and so that when a visitor came by, they could wash their hands before they touch the doorknobs and enter the school. Is that the purpose?
Yes.
Trustee Trill?
I think this is a great list, and I'm support of it. It might be a little bit off subject. If it is, I can bring it up another time. Just wondering about the construction of the outdoor classroom. I know it's a different set of dollars. It kind of goes hand in hand with what is trying to be accomplished here, whether that's still going ahead or when we're looking at that.
The outdoor classroom at Desert Sands, is my understanding, is still going ahead. I don't have an update on that. That is something that we could provide an update back to the board.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, Trustee Storkan? Sorry, Orra, I'm going back to first names.
I guess my question just is kind of off a bit in left field too. With the outdoor sinks, are they good all winter?
I don't know, but we can check on that as well.
I'm curious what they will do in Clinton at 40 below. You know, just
Yeah, my understanding is not every school is using them. There's one is currently in place and two others are looking at it, so it wouldn't be at every site, and I don't believe Clinton is one.
Thank you. Yes. Can't throw it at people. Thank you. No other questions? No further questions? So can I? So Trustee Trill moves. Trustee Casper second. All in favor? Thank you. Policy 2.30, budget and capital plan development. In September, the board reviewed policy 2.30, budget and capital plan development, and it is recommended that the Board of Education adopt policy 2.30, budget and capital plan development as presented. Can I get a mover, please? Trustee Ranta, seconded Trustee Aljam. Any questions? No? All in favor? Thank you. Policy 7.30, emergency response plan. 2.3, that in September, the recommends that the Board of Education adopt 7.30 emergency response plan as presented. Can I get a mover? Trustee Ranta, seconded Trustee Adrian. Any questions? Comments? All in favor? Oh, sorry, no. Trustee Orra?
Thank you. I'm just madly trying to read my note here. It says under limitations and constraints, the plans are reviewed annually by district management. And my question is, when the plans are reviewed, how will the board be informed of the status?
it is not district management's practice to inform the board of that.
Thank you.
I guess that question comes from, I'm trying to understand, so if there were a hazard, how would we then learn about it?
So I apologize for the quick answer, Trustee Storkan. So the way that we were informed these policies worked is if there is a problem, then the board addresses it through the policy. So it is through your limitations and constraints. It's our responsibility to review them and make sure they are appropriately in place. If trustees or the board became aware that there wasn't, then that would be a board conversation.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And now please forgive me if I mispronounce. 7.5, question correspondence? Is that close? Okay, thank you. Is seeking a letter of support from the Board of Education for the construction of the Hoiston Cultural Arbor grounds. There is a letter attached, if everybody has read it. Valerie is listening in, but will not be participating in that conversation. Thank you. Carmen? Can you please use your microphone?
I would move that we write a letter of support for the Hoiston Cultural Arbor Grounds funding application.
Thank you. And Trustee Trill seconds. And Larry, did you have anything you would like to add?
No, I'm just going to second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Would anybody like to say anything? No, I think it's an excellent idea. I think it's a great opportunity. So all in favor? Thank you. 7.6, strategic planning process. In September, the Board of Education engaged Turtle Island Consulting Incorporated as the facilitator for the development of their new strategic plan. Attached is a response from Turtle Island Consulting to the board's queries. Is there any comments, concerns, anything on this line from everybody? No, all good. So we will look forward to getting a plan developed and get the schedule underway, and we'll get started on it. Yes? On through, Donna.
Just follow up in regards to that. We had some action items from that as well too. So there were some questions to amendments. Was that addressed, and how did that go? Because there was discussion about maybe changing costs too, maybe.
I'm drawing a blank here, sorry. There was some questions regarding whether we could have some in-person interviews and whether or not there would be in-person face-to-face meeting. That was the only two concerns that I had. And because COVID-19 is still quite rampant, they prefer not to do in-person meetings. Okay.
It had something to do with elders. There was a discussion about present elders or local elders being involved versus their recommended elder.
This group?
I remember that conversation being resolved at the last meeting, that it was their process, and so it would be their elder. That's our recollection, I think, as staff.
Orra?
I just noticed here, it does say they are supportive of the one-to-one dialogue sessions, and they've given us 3 opportunities to participate that way if we choose. But it does say the sessions are optional and by request from respective board trustees. So I'm just wondering how that would be arranged.
So the next step in the process is after the board saw it today, is that it's Natasha's plan and members of the Turtle Island team to connect with the board chairs and start to create the concrete plan that Trustee Rempel spoke of.
Okay, thank you. Donna, is your hand up or you're just, oh, okay, sorry, thank you. Valerie, did you have any questions? No, okay, thank you. Well, that sounds like it's a step forward. And moving on to Board of Education meetings. The board will discuss the way in which the November meeting will be facilitated. Okay. Trustee Adrian would like to have a say. Thank you. Questions?
Just like, I know this was discussed at the last meeting, but the one thing that I would like to maybe add to the plan or state plan or whatever it's called is to have the, I know we never get 25 people in a room, but to have it written somewhere that there's not more than 25 people in a room, including the staff and the trustees, because if there is at any time, then I have to take 2 weeks off of work to self-isolate, and it's unpaid.
I'm totally in agreement with that. I don't see an issue with it, but how do other trustees feel?
That sounds great to me. I know that at my workplace, we also do it based on the size of the room, so there is a real designated number of how many people can be in a certain size room.
Thank you. Carmen?
I would just expect that all COVID protocols would be followed for the process.
Trustee Trill?
I think, and maybe Val can correct me, but I think what she's saying though is that her specific workplace has that specific, which is different than what the regular protocols would be. So she's asking if we would change our protocols to reflect what hers is, so she can still come to meetings.
Yes, that's correct. Right, Val? Yes, thank you. Okay, so with that being the only change, we will be meeting in person again in November. Is that the way what we're going with here? I got one thumbs up. Yes, Orra?
Just a question, did I read somewhere that we had then said we would meet electronically through the winter months?
It was discussed. I don't think we actually specified. This is why it's on the agenda today for November. And we don't meet in December. So for the winter months, we're looking at January, February, basically, beginning of November. Most of us are fairly safe. I'm probably, I'm married, probably the ones getting snow, but so all those who would be willing to go in-person meeting for November, we'll just do a quick vote. Okay, so we will be meeting here in November, on November, how do we? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Valerie gave a thumbs up and said thank you. Information, report from district management. Oops. Okay. Did everybody read the report from district management and any questions? I shouldn't say did anybody read it. Sorry. Trustee Trill.
I just wanted to highlight that it sounds like a much better consultation process. I really like what's being, I guess, tried according to the ministry, but I also would like to hear, once the process has taken its course, I'd like to know how did it meet the target that they were hoping for. And then on the sustainability, so sustainability, you talked about the health and safety committee, you talked about that earlier too, but I just wanted to know, we've been hearing in the news about BCTF and their concerns with work safety. I'm just wondering whether there's been any response regarding feeling safe at work from our local unions or excluded staff groups?
Each school has a functioning joint health and safety committee, and they inform the District Health and Safety Committee of any issues. So as issues arise, we have been able to address them. We're not aware, I mean, obviously people have individual circumstances or context, and my sense is that people are sort of managing those as best they can. As a District Health and Safety Committee, we are not aware of any sort of outstanding issues that we have not been able to address.
Also in the same report, it talks about clarification on student reporting. I'm not super clear on it, so I just wanted a little more clarification. I mean, normally we have the fall count and then we have the New Year count, right, February or something. So how is this exactly different?
Usually there are two categories. There would be the standard school enrollment and distributed learning. They have added this third category of standard schools transition to in-class instruction program. And if a student is registered and receiving an educational program with the goal of transitioning back to school, they can be recorded in that.
Exiting. Heather?
They will be reported in that category, whereas usually it's just the audit requirements would be registration and attendance in a school building in order to be claimed on September 30th. So this additional category allows for families to transition their children back to school, even if they're not physically in attendance during the month of September.
Okay, so dates are the same for reporting.
Correct.
Thank you. And Valerie, you had a question?
Yes, some of the parents were wondering with me, why this is called consultation for the review, the proposal. And I know we've talked about this in the past, that this really isn't consultation. I know we've gone through this over and over the years on what is defined as consultation. And some of the parents are given a paper to sign, and that's not consultation. And we, as trustees, we should be careful not to do that, because it's happened so many times to the Indigenous communities through the years that we really should be careful on how we word things.
Are you looking for a reply or just a comment?
Well, I'm not quite sure if we can have a reply. When I read that final part at the end, I would have brought them in our conversation earlier, but I didn't see this. So it can be brought up at another time if right now.
Okay, thank you. It will be kept in the back of minds. Thank you. And now we go to Trustee Ranta for our BCSTA Provincial Council meeting that is up and coming, that is going to be a fairly long meeting.
Yes. They have the time until 4:30. Yes. So I do believe that I did email the trustees the Provincial Council agenda just as a separate document. And just to let you know early into the report that there's basically only one motion that I don't support in the whole realm of motions, including the AGM motions. Okay. So I'm going to just do a little running commentary on things that are going to come up at the meeting, and if there's any questions or opportunity for discussion, just interrupt me, because it's going to kind of feel like a bit like a whirlwind as I go through some of the agenda, but basically there's nothing too unusual or contentious except for maybe one motion. So just to know that, like, as everybody knows, the Provincial Council role is to approve and oversee the budget for BCSTA. And I know Val does quite a bit of work on this at the Board of Directors. And Val, if there's anything you want to interject, please do so in my talk. the budget planning for the year 2021-22 is occurring, and that any increases to our fees would be based on the Vancouver CPI, cost of living index basically, and the changes in enrollment in districts, because right now our fees are based on our number of students. So I'll move on to a totally different subject. There's a lot of committee report approvals and approvals of minutes and things like that in the agenda. And then we kind of get into the meatier part. So I'm going to skip all the way to page 139. And that would be, how did the Board of Directors determine which motions from the AGM motions would be decided by Provincial Council at the next meeting? And so there were 3 different options given to the movers of the motion, and for me as a branch resolutions chair, I did get an email saying, are your motions, do you want them considered at Provincial Council? Do you want them to wait until the AGM, or do you want to withdraw because the AGM was cancelled? And so the mover of the motion basically was the one that determined what would happen to the motion. The motions from the full listing of AGM motions are on page 142 to 145, and if you want to just go, if you're interested in the AGM and what happened to the motions, you can see the full listing there. Moving to the financial statements, so part of the meeting, purpose of the Provincial Council meeting this time is to receive the auditor report, and the, I guess, most interesting thing kind of out of the financials is the fact that the surplus of the year end that's basically due to COVID is $159,000. So $159,000 was unspent due to COVID, basically AGM being cancelled, etc., travel. And so that's kind of an unexpended excess. And the unspent externally restricted funds for BCSTA is $475,450, so almost $500,000 of unspent externally restricted funds. So then I'm going to move now into the motions from the 2020 AGM the Provincial Council is going to consider. And that starts at page 175, so if you're following along, that's where we were going to be. Now, I'm not sure if the board here right now wants me to go over each one quickly, or do you want just kind of general highlight?
I'm for general highlights.
Okay. Okay. So, so basically, there's 4 different motions that are branch constitution and bylaw changes from different branches, and they're kind of the desire of that branch, and I totally support the branch to kind of have their constitution how they would like to have it. Very small changes, a bit of a fee change to one of them. Then the other motions basically are kind of a wide variety of different motions. There's one on active transportation, supporting a winter meeting attendance via video conference for Provincial Council, which is very important and will save money. Just quite a wide variety of different things, which I totally support. Then there's 3 emergent motions to Provincial Council that are not from the AGM motion. The first one is 10.1, and that's an enhanced approach to co-governance for the recovery stage of COVID-19. And it's being brought forward because the mover wants more opportunity for school board or boards of education to have feedback moving forward into whatever the future looks like with COVID. So as we just experienced, things were really quick, and the board of directors and BCSTA represented us in the provincial conversations. But this motion is asking for an enhanced co-governance approach, and it references, you know, our co-governance, you know, documents with the province and things like that. I am not sure I support this motion. And the reason is because we just experienced an emergency and we're still in an emergency, so I want to hear the presentation and the debate on it before I actually know how I would like to vote. Now, is there any feedback from trustees here today about those ideas so far?
Does it say in the rationale, I didn't read that whole thing, how they would propose that? So are they meaning chairs would have a liaison meeting, like was just canceled, but, and give their feedback, or like what does that exactly look like? I'm not quite sure. I think that would, whatever the answer to that is, it would influence how I would feel about it as well.
Yeah. I don't recall, just from my memory, the, here it is. There's no kind of plan for how. It's more addressing the concern. So it would be, the motion is that the BCSTA urge, so we're asking the BCSTA, like board of directors, to take an action on this. They're basically asking more for time and strengthening of communication. Those are the two bullets. So more time to allow for feedback and more communication and collaboration, and boards of education would be more involved than just BCSTA.
So I absolutely understand why you would like to hear how the conversation goes, because it could take on quite a unique flavor, and I'm not exactly sure where it's going either. I understand the concern because, well, in lots of regards this happens, but especially in COVID, we get the directive, even as referenced earlier, that the government says this is how you'll do your COVID-19 protocols, period. And then we implement it. Whether we agree or not, that's already the way it goes. And that I find a bit challenging because we all have unique, you know, circumstances where we are, whether it be rural or urban or other factors that play into that. So on that respect, it really would be nice to have some feedback. And you know, we even had the conversation regarding should we be meeting in person or should we stay via Zoom? What is, you know, politically, what is the best way for us to do this? And it'd be nice to have some feedback regarding that too. I know that we've heard from different Indigenous communities that their community is saying don't go outside of your community. Has that been considered? And so those kind of conversations I think we do need to be a part of. Yeah, so that would be all I could say, but yay or nay, I'm not sure because I'm not sure where they're headed with it.
Okay, so I thank you very much. That does help, and I'm glad that I'm not the only one that kind of is curious about the bigger kind of debate about it. So I'll see how the vote goes. The vote, we still have until the 24th.
Valerie, did you ever want to chime in on anything here? No? Okay. I'm with both of you because if the conversation and how they actually put it out there could totally change what they're actually trying to say. So. Donna?
Just to support you in that too. I find that it would be more split in half again in regards to that because there is the need for the meeting, right? Because besides the board of directors meeting, they need to have that emergency meeting as well too, and that's separate. And then you have the other costs that are added to that. How is that cost going to look? And again, that stems from the meeting too. So it's almost a two-item thing that's going to be broken into. That's how I would see it.
Okay, I'll try to take that forward moving into the debate.
We're going to trust your judgment.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, being in a pandemic, being in the emergency, being an elected official, and kind of watching things happen so quickly, it's just been quite an experience for everyone, including, I would expect, the staff. So then the other emergent motions, there's one on anti-Black racism, which looks really good. good. And the public sector wage freeze, which is just asking for an exemption for district leaders, because right now there's been a freeze announced from the Premier August 2020 again. So we had a little window of opportunity to get, the QP negotiations, teacher negotiations, and now freeze again, and we just experienced such a drag out with trying to create equity or create opportunity for reasonable increases for the the executive, not excluded staff. So we, that motion actually at this time, I do support that one. So we'll just, anyway, wish me luck for a very long session on Zoom and their technology, etc. But I think it's really interesting and very, very good to try to have a provincial council meeting online, because just imagine the cost savings, even if only once a year the meetings were online, it would be thousands of dollars that could be saved by the association. So thank you, everyone. Are any further questions, or that's the end of my report?
I'm good. I would like to thank you and make sure you push hard. I don't think it'll be a big push for the Thompson Okanagan branch motion going forward. Yeah. Thank you. I see that just about all the other branches were asking for the same things. So. Yeah. Much appreciated. Now we are on to info pack. Anybody? No? Okay. I just have to put my mic down for 1 second because I cannot do 3 things with me.
I would just like to compliment the Village of Ashcroft on their newsletter. I think it's absolutely really easy to read and very interesting to read their newsletter, and I think it's a good way of communicating, and it's, to me, it's effective, and I like reading those, so just kudos to Village of Ashcroft.
Thank you. And I'm not quite sure, it seems that we are pretty much at the end of our meeting. I would like to just make a couple of thank yous. And as I mentioned at the Thompson Okanagan branch meeting, and because I'm no longer president, but I get to do this anyway, I would like to give Jill this bouquet of flowers, because as we usually give flowers to the EA who has done from the host district, well, there was no host district other than you, so you deserve the flowers. So thank you very much. And at the same time, I would like to say thank you to Teresa and Linda for all of their exceptional work from March on, that you guys have gone above and beyond, and our district totally shows for it, and we totally thank you so much. Just a little bit of inspiration. And on that note, I think we are adjourned. Right, thank you. Oh, question period?